The abandoned baby was killing her with cold, frost crawling up her veins like poison. But when his father appeared, ancient and terrifying and radiating enough power to level the city, she realized the burning pain in her arms was the least of her problems. Because this vampire king had left his son in that dumpster for a reason. And she just ruined everything. Hey gorgeous souls. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you back. It means so much to share this space with you. If you're new here, jump right in. We're on a thrilling journey together, and you are officially part of our story from this moment forward. Whether you're a regular or just tuning in, grab your favorite snacks, settle in, and let's make some amazing memories. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love getting to know each of you. And stay tuned because tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Mariska Paltrow had a rule about Wednesdays. Expect nothing, survive everything, and never, under any circumstances, take out the trash after midnight. Yet here she stood at 12:47 a.m. on a drizzly October Wednesday in Portland, Oregon, dragging 3 bags of coffee grounds and stale pastries toward the dumpster behind Ember's End Cafe, wondering exactly when her life had become a cautionary tale. The alley smelled like wet cardboard and broken dreams, which was pretty much on brand for this part of the city. Neon signs from the tattoo parlor next door flickered in Morse code, spelling out messages only the truly desperate could read. A cat yowled somewhere in the darkness, probably judging her life choices. She was 2 feet from the dumpster when she heard it. Not crying. Not quite. More like the sound of wind trapped in a pipe, or grief compressed into frequency. It made her back teeth ache and her skin prickle with the kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with wrongness. Oh hell no, Mariska muttered, already moving toward the sound despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. 7 years of night shifts had taught her that ignoring weird noises in alleys was how people ended up as true crime podcasts. At least if she investigated, she'd know what was eating her before it finished. Behind the dumpster, nestled between a mountain of coffee grounds and yesterday's croissants, lay a bundle wrapped in fabric that looked like it belonged in a Victorian funeral home. Black silk, embroidered with silver threads that caught the dim light like spider webs. The sound was coming from inside. Mariska's hand hovered over the bundle. This was it. This was the moment in every horror movie where the audience screamed, "Don't open it, you idiot." And the protagonist did it anyway. She'd always judged those characters harshly. She opened it anyway. The baby inside was the palest thing she'd ever seen. Not sickly pale, marble pale. Moonlight pale. The kind of pale that suggested whoever made this child had forgotten to add pigment and just went with it. His eyes were open, unfocused, pupils dilated to pinpricks that seemed to swallow light. He wasn't crying now. He was just existing, barely like a candle flame in a hurricane. Okay, Mariska said to the universe at large. Hey, this is fine. This is totally normal. Just a regular abandoned baby situation. Nothing weird about. She scooped him up and her arms exploded with pain. Not heat. Cold. The kind of cold that burns, that sears, that makes your nerve endings scream in confusion because they're not equipped to process this level of wrongness. Frost crept along her sleeves like living things, crystallizing the fabric of her work shirt. Where his tears touched her skin, because he was crying now, silent tears that fell like ice chips. Tiny frost flowers bloomed, delicate and deadly and impossibly beautiful. The baby's mouth opened and Mariska saw them. 2 tiny pearl-white fangs, no bigger than rice grains, perfect and sharp and absolutely, definitively not human. Of course, she said flatly, her voice remarkably steady for someone whose worldview was currently reformatting. Because a regular abandoned baby would be too easy. Why would the universe give me easy? She looked down at the child, the fledgling her mind supplied unhelpfully, and made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her entire existence. She carried him inside. The cafe was in its usual post-midnight configuration. 3 insomniacs scattered among the tables like strategic game pieces, 2 graduate students who'd mainlined so much espresso they'd probably achieved enlightenment, and Rebecca, who claimed she was between dimensions, and paid for her coffee with what appeared to be Monopoly money from an alternate timeline. They all looked up when Mariska entered and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Don't ask, Mariska said, heading straight for the counter. Actually, do ask. I need someone to tell me I'm not hallucinating. She laid the baby on the counter, between the espresso machine and the tip jar, because apparently that's where her life was now, and wrapped him in every clean towel she could find. Her hands were shaking. The frost was spreading from his skin like a slow-motion explosion, creating patterns on the laminate that looked almost intentional. Dmitri, the philosophy student who always smelled like cardamom and existential crisis, approached first. He took one look at the baby and went completely white. "That's a fledgling," he said quietly. "A vampire child. Extremely rare. Extremely illegal. Extremely cold," Mariska interrupted, flexing her fingers which had gone numb. "Yeah, I noticed. What do I do with him?" "You can't call child services," Rebecca offered, floating over in that way she had that suggested gravity was more of a suggestion than a law. "They're notoriously bad with supernatural custody cases. Last time they tried to rehome a demon toddler, 3 social workers spontaneously combusted. There was a memo." "That's not helpful, Rebecca." "I'm rarely helpful. I'm honest. There's a difference." Mariska looked down at the baby. He'd stopped crying, but his eyes, those strange, unfocused eyes, were fixed on her face with an intensity that suggested he was seeing something the rest of them couldn't. The frost around him pulsed in rhythm with what might have been breathing, might have been magic, might have been both. "He's freezing," she said softly. "Not just cold. He's actually literally freezing. Look at the counter." They looked. The laminate was covered in intricate frost patterns, spreading outward from the baby like fractals, like snowflakes, like the kind of mathematical beauty that suggested intelligence behind the design. "He's a frost prince," Dmitri said, and his voice held the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious experiences or really good coffee. "Oh my God. Do you know what this means? That I'm going to lose my security deposit? That someone very powerful and very dangerous is looking for him." The words had barely left Dmitri's mouth when the cafe door opened. And the world changed. The temperature didn't just drop, it plummeted. Every light bulb flickered in unison. Every candle flame bent horizontal as if reality itself was bowing. The espresso machine made a sound like a dying whale. Mariska's breath came out in visible clouds, and she could feel ice forming in her lungs with each inhalation. He stood in the doorway like a wound in the world, like something that shouldn't exist but did anyway, and everyone in the cafe felt it. The weight of centuries, the pressure of power, the absolute certainty that they were in the presence of something ancient and terrible and completely beyond human comprehension. Impossibly elegant. Dressed in black that seemed less like clothing and more like concentrated darkness given form. His hair fell like silver water past his shoulders, catching light that shouldn't exist and reflecting it back wrong. And his face, God, his face, looked like something Michelangelo would have carved and then destroyed out of fear, because beauty that perfect couldn't possibly be natural. But it was his eyes that stopped Mariska's heart. They were the color of frozen oceans, of winter lakes, of every cold, beautiful, deadly thing that had ever existed. And they were fixed on the baby with an expression of such absolute horror, such devastating recognition, that Mariska knew with the certainty of gravity and death and taxes, exactly who this man was. "You," he whispered, and his voice was like gravel sliding over silk, like honey mixed with broken glass. Mariska's hand moved before her brain caught up, positioning herself between the stranger and the baby. "Let me guess," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You're the father." The vampire king stared at her like she'd just slapped him across the face with a frozen fish. Which, given the circumstances, might have been less shocking than a 5'4" waitress with coffee stains on her apron physically blocking his path to a supernatural infant. "I am Valerius," he said, and his voice carried the weight of empires. "King of the northern bloodlines. Lord of the frozen courts. Sovereign of—" "Yeah, that's great, super impressive, love the titles," Mariska interrupted, crossing her arms. "You're also apparently a deadbeat dad who left his kid in a dumpster behind a coffee shop. So maybe lead with that next time you're introducing yourself." The cafe went so silent that Mariska could hear her own heartbeat. Actually, she could hear everyone's heartbeat, thundering in the sudden vacuum of sound. Even the espresso machine had stopped gurgling, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Valerius's eyes flashed crimson, actually flashed like someone had lit fires behind his irises. "You dare." "I dare plenty, your majesty." Mariska picked up the baby, feeling the now familiar burn of his freezing skin. Her arms screamed in protest, but she held firm. Because unlike you, apparently, I don't abandon children behind coffee shops. What were you thinking? Actually, don't answer that. You clearly weren't. Something extraordinary happened then. The Vampire King, ancient, feared, untouchable, with enough power to level city blocks and enough influence to topple governments, flinched. It was a small movement. A barely perceptible shift in his shoulders, a minute tightening around his eyes. But Mariska had spent 7 years reading people across a counter, learning to spot the difference between, "I'm fine," and "I'm 3 seconds from a breakdown," and she recognized the expression on Valerius's face. "Shame. You don't understand," he said, and his voice cracked like ice under pressure. "That child is a frost prince. Born wrong. Born with the old magic, the kind that kills indiscriminately. I didn't abandon him. I was protecting the world from a baby?" Mariska laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sharp and brittle like glass breaking. Right. Because this tiny thing is such a threat. Look at him. He weighs maybe 8 pounds. What's he going to do, freeze someone to death with his adorable little face?" "Yes," Valerius said simply, and the word landed like a stone in still water. "Exactly that." He moved closer, and Mariska forced herself not to step back. She could feel the cold radiating off him. Not the burning cold of the baby, but a different kind. Controlled. The cold of deep winter, of frozen tundra, of places where warmth went to die. "He'll freeze everything he touches," Valerius continued, his voice dropping to something that might have been sorrow or might have been rage or might have been both. "Everyone he loves. His mother." He stopped. Closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were completely black, like holes in the world. His mother held him for 17 seconds. That's how long it took for her heart to crystallize. I watched the ice spread through her veins like poison. I watched her smile fade. I watched her die, and I couldn't stop it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mariska looked down at the baby. At his tiny, perfect face. At the frost spreading from his skin like a disease, creating patterns on the towels that looked almost like artwork. She thought about her burning arms, the way warmth seemed to flee from his presence like refugees from a war zone. Then she thought, so what? "Listen, Your Highness," she said, meeting Valerius's eyes without flinching. "I've worked night shift in this city for 7 years. You know what I've learned? Everything cold can be warmed up. Everything broken can be fixed. And everything scared." She looked directly at him, at the ancient creature who'd lived centuries and still somehow managed to be terrified of an 8-pound infant. "Can learn to be brave." "You're a fool," Valerius said quietly. "Probably. But I'm a fool who's holding your son. And he's not freezing me to death, is he?" It was true. The burning had stopped. Not completely. The baby was still impossibly cold, cold enough that she could feel her body heat draining away like water down a sink. But somehow Mariska's warmth was holding steady. Not overwhelming the cold, but coexisting with it. Like winter and hearth fire in the same room. Like ice and flame finding balance. Valerius stepped closer, and for the first time his composure cracked completely. His hands shook. Actually shook, trembling like leaves in a storm. His breath came faster, visible in the frigid air of the cafe. And when he looked at the child, truly looked, without the filter of fear and guilt and centuries of emotional armor, his eyes filled with something Mariska had never expected to see. Tears. They froze on his cheeks, creating trails of ice that glittered in the cafe's dim lighting like diamonds. "I killed his mother," he whispered, and the words came out broken, shattered. "I brought him into this world, and it cost her everything. She was light and warmth and laughter, and I destroyed her. How am I supposed to look at him and not see what I've done? How am I supposed to hold him when my touch might kill him too?" "You're supposed to try," Mariska said firmly. "That's what parents do. They try. They fail. They try again. And yeah, sometimes it's cold and it hurts and you want to run away and hide in a dumpster like your kid apparently did. But you don't. Because he needs you. He deserves better than a father who's afraid of him. Maybe. But he's got you. So you can either stand here having an existential crisis in my cafe, or you can figure out how to be what he needs. Your choice." Valerius stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, so slowly it seemed to take years, he reached out one hand toward the baby. "Don't," Dmitri warned from somewhere behind the counter where he'd apparently taken shelter. Frost princes are unpredictable. The cold can spike without warning. You could lose your hand. I've lost worse things, Valerius said softly. His fingers touched the baby's cheek. Nothing happened. No explosion of cold. No crystallizing flesh. No frozen horror. Just a father touching his son for what might have been the first time, his hand trembling against impossibly pale skin, his expression caught somewhere between wonder and devastation. The baby opened his eyes, those strange, unfocused eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing, and smiled. The frost around him shimmered, caught light, transformed from threat to beauty in an instant. The patterns on the towels shifted, becoming less chaotic and more intentional, creating shapes that looked almost like letters in a language no one in the cafe could read. Alexander, Valerius whispered. Your mother named you Alexander. Defender of mankind. He laughed, but it came out choked. She always did have a sense of irony. That's his name? Mariska asked. Yes. Though I've called him nothing but danger and mistake in my mind. Valerius pulled his hand back and Mariska could see the effort it took. I should go. I shouldn't be here. I'm only making things worse. Running away again? That's your strategy. It's kept me alive for 3 centuries. Yeah, but has it made you happy? The question hung in the air like smoke. Valerius looked at her with an expression that suggested happiness was a concept he'd forgotten existed, like a language he'd once spoken fluently and could now barely remember. Happiness, he said slowly, is for creatures who don't carry death in their veins and winters in their souls. Happiness is for... The cafe door exploded open. Not metaphorically. Literally exploded, torn from its hinges by a blast of power that sent splinters flying like shrapnel. 4 figures entered, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested military training or predatory instinct or both. They wore black armor that seemed to drink light. Their faces were hidden behind masks carved from what looked like bone. And they carried weapons, swords that gleamed with frost, that seemed to pull heat from the air just by existing. Lord Valerius, the lead figure said, their voice distorted by the mask. Step away from the abomination. By order of the Blood Council, the Frost Prince must be destroyed. Mariska looked down at the baby in her arms. At Alexander, who was looking up at her with complete trust, complete innocence, completely unaware that he'd just been sentenced to death by his own kind. Then she looked at Valerius, whose expression had shifted from broken to absolutely murderous. Over my dead body, the Vampire King said softly. And the cafe erupted into chaos. The first assassin moved like liquid shadow, crossing the distance between the door and the counter in less than a heartbeat. His sword came down in an arc that would have split Mariska and the baby in half if Valerius hadn't suddenly been there, catching the blade with his bare hand. Ice spread from the point of contact, racing up the sword like wildfire, encasing the weapon in crystalline frost. Valerius twisted, and the blade shattered into 1,000 pieces that hung in the air like suspended snow. I said, Valerius repeated, his voice dropping to something that barely qualified as sound and more resembled the feeling of frostbite, over my dead body. The assassin stumbled back and Mariska could see fear in his body language even through the armor. Good. Let them be afraid. She clutched Alexander tighter, backing toward the kitchen. The baby had started making that sound again, the wind through frozen pipes sound, and frost was spreading across her arms in intricate spirals. Her skin was going numb, but she didn't care. Let it freeze. Let it burn. She wasn't letting go. There are 4 of us and 1 of you, the lead assassin said, though their voice carried significantly less confidence than before. The council's orders are clear. The Frost Prince is a threat to all bloodlines. He must be eliminated. The council, Valerius said, and he smiled, can take their orders and shove them somewhere the sun does shine. Which, given that we're vampires, should be quite uncomfortable. He moved. Mariska had seen fights before. Bar brawls, mostly the kind where drunk idiots threw slow punches and slower insults. This wasn't that. This was something else entirely. A dance, a massacre, a force of nature given purpose and direction. Valerius became a blur of motion, his form shifting between solid and shadow, between man and something other. The second assassin lunged with their frost sword, and Valerius simply wasn't there anymore. He appeared behind them, one hand on their shoulder, and ice spread from his palm like a plague. The assassin's scream cut off as their entire body crystallized, becoming a statue of frozen agony. "Two," Valerius said calmly. The remaining 3 assassins exchanged glances. Mariska could practically hear their mental calculations. Attack together, overwhelm him with numbers, complete the mission. Standard tactics. Predictable. They attacked together. Valerius laughed. Actually laughed, the sound echoing through the cafe like bells made of ice, and met them head-on. His movements were impossibly fast, inhumanly graceful, each strike placed with surgical precision. He wasn't just fighting. He was performing. Showing them exactly why he was king, why his name was whispered in fear across every bloodline, why crossing him was the last mistake anyone ever made. The 3rd assassin's mask shattered under Valerius's fist, revealing a face frozen in permanent terror. The 4th tried to flee and made it exactly 3 steps before Valerius's hand closed around their neck. Ice spread. The assassin stopped moving. That left the leader. They stood alone in the center of the destroyed cafe, surrounded by their fallen comrades, facing down a vampire king who looked less like a person and more like winter given teeth and purpose. "Please," the assassin said, and their voice had lost all its earlier authority. Now they just sounded young. Feared. Human. "I'm just following orders." "So was everyone who ever committed an atrocity," Valerius replied. "Do you know what I learned in 3 centuries of existence? Following orders is how good people become monsters. And I should know. I've been both." He took a step forward. The assassin took a step back. "Go back to the council," Valerius said softly. "Tell them that the Frost Prince is under my protection. Tell them that anyone who comes for my son will join the permafrost. Tell them that Valerius Frostborn has chosen his side, and it is not theirs. They'll send an army." "Good. I could use the exercise." The assassin fled, stumbling over debris, practically falling through the destroyed doorway in their haste to escape. Mariska watched them go, then looked around at what remained of her cafe. The espresso machine was on its side, leaking water that had frozen into abstract sculptures. 3 of the tables had been reduced to kindling. The counter where she'd laid Alexander had a crater in it that looked like someone had dropped a meteor. And standing in the middle of it all, looking like a Renaissance painting titled, "King of Destruction," was Valerius. His silver hair was disheveled. His black clothing was torn in places, revealing skin that seemed to glow with an inner cold. His chest heaved with unnecessary breaths. Vampires didn't need to breathe, but apparently old habits died hard. And his eyes were still that unsettling shade of black that suggested he was running on instinct rather than reason. "So," Mariska said into the silence. "That happened." Valerius turned to look at her and slowly, so slowly, the black receded from his eyes, replaced by that frozen ocean blue. He looked at the destruction, at the frozen bodies, at the cafe that would never serve coffee again, and something like guilt flickered across his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've destroyed your livelihood. Your sanctuary. I can compensate." "You can shut up," Mariska interrupted. "You just saved our lives. My insurance can handle the property damage." "Probably. Maybe. Okay, definitely not, but that's a problem for tomorrow, Mariska. Tonight Mariska is just trying not to have a complete breakdown." She looked down at Alexander, who had stopped making the frozen pipe sound and was now just staring at her. His unfocused eyes seemed to be seeing something or trying to, his tiny face scrunched up in concentration. "Is he blind?" she asked suddenly. "His eyes don't track movement. They just kind of exist." Valerius went very still. "Yes. Frost princes are born blind. The cold damages their optic nerves in the womb. They see through other means, temperature, magical signatures, the heat of living things. But traditional sight." He shook his head. "That's lost to them. So he's been alone in the dark since birth?" "Yes." "And you left him in a dumpster. In the dark. Alone." Valerius flinched again, and Mariska felt a savage satisfaction at hitting that nerve. "Good. Let him feel it. Let him understand exactly what he'd done." "I thought," Valerius said slowly, each word seeming to cost him, "that death would be kinder than a life of isolation. Frost princes can't be touched without causing pain. Can't be loved without causing death. I thought I was being merciful." "Merciful," Mariska repeated flatly. You thought abandoning a blind baby in an alley was merciful. Yes. You're an idiot. Yes. The simple agreement seemed to surprise both of them. Valerius looked at her with something that might have been curiosity or might have been the dawning realization that he'd been having a conversation with a human who kept insulting him and he hadn't killed her yet. Why haven't you run? He asked. You're human. Fragile. Mortal. You just watched me kill 3 vampires without breaking a sweat. Most humans would be traumatized. Most would flee. You're just standing there, holding my son, insulting me. Mariska shrugged, adjusting Alexander in her arms. Her muscles were screaming. The baby was heavier than he looked and the cold was making everything harder, but she wasn't putting him down. I've seen worse things on night shift. Last month, a werewolf tried to pay for his coffee with a live rabbit. The month before that, a demon asked me out and got offended when I said no. He tried to curse me with eternal hiccups. Dimitri had to exorcise him with espresso and Latin phrases from Wikipedia. That's... Valerius paused. That's not normal. Nothing about this city is normal. That's why I love it. She walked over to one of the few intact chairs and sat down, carefully arranging Alexander so his weight was distributed better. The baby made a small sound, not crying, not the frozen pipes noise, just a tiny vocalization that might have been contentment or might have been baby nonsense. Hard to tell. Valerius watched her with an expression that suggested he was trying to solve a complex equation and kept getting different answers. You're not afraid of me. Oh, I'm terrified, Mariska corrected. I'm just really good at not showing it. Customer service training. You learn to smile at people who are screaming about their latte temperature while internally planning their demise. That's relatable. I was going to say sociopathic, but relatable works too. Despite everything, the destroyed cafe, the frozen corpses, the supernatural baby in her arms, the vampire king standing 5 feet away looking like he'd stepped out of a gothic romance novel, Mariska laughed. It came out slightly hysterical, edged with shock and exhaustion and the kind of manic energy that comes from surviving something that should have killed you. So what now? She asked when she'd gotten herself under control. The assassins know where we are. They'll be back. Probably with reinforcements. Probably with better weapons. Probably with a plan that involves not underestimating you. We run, Valerius said immediately. I take Alexander somewhere safe. Somewhere hidden. Somewhere the council can't find us. And me. You. He hesitated. You go home. Forget this happened. Live your life. You've already done more than. No. The word dropped like a stone. Simple. Final. Non-negotiable. Valerius blinked. No. I'm not leaving him. Mariska looked down at Alexander, at his pale face and unfocused eyes and the frost that clung to him like a second skin. He can't see. He can't cry properly. He's been abandoned, hunted, and almost killed, and he's maybe 6 months old. So no, I'm not going home. I'm coming with you. That's insane. Yeah, well, I've already established I'm a fool. Might as well commit. You'll die, Valerius said flatly. The places I need to go, the things I'll need to do to protect him, they'll kill you. You're human. You're not built for this world. Mariska met his eyes. Then I guess you'd better keep me alive. What would you do if you found an abandoned child? Would you walk away to protect yourself or risk everything to help them? Drop your thoughts below. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications and terrible decisions. Finally, Valerius nodded slowly. Very well. But know this, Mariska of the night shift. You follow me into darkness. Into danger. Into a world where your humanity is a weakness and your compassion is a liability. I cannot guarantee your safety. I can barely guarantee my own. I'll take my chances. Then we leave now. Before the council sends reinforcements. He looked around the destroyed cafe one last time. Do you need anything? Belongings? Supplies? Mariska thought about her tiny apartment 3 blocks away. About her collection of terrible horror movies and her plants that were probably already dead and her normal, boring, safe life that was about to become extremely abnormal and exciting and dangerous. Just one thing, she said, standing up carefully, still holding Alexander. My good jacket. It's in the back. Valerius stared at her. Your cafe has been destroyed. Your life is in danger. Vampire assassins want to kill everyone in this room. And you're worried about a jacket. It's a really good jacket. For the first time since he'd entered the cafe, Valerius smiled. Not a smirk, not a cruel twist of lips, but an actual smile, small and genuine and surprisingly warm for someone who literally embodied winter. All right then, he said. Get your jacket. And then we run. They ran. Not in the traditional sense. Valerius didn't exactly run so much as he glided through shadows like they were doorways to somewhere else. And Mariska, clutching Alexander and her admittedly excellent leather jacket, had to sprint to keep up. Portland streets blurred past them, neon signs and graffiti and homeless encampments creating a kaleidoscope of urban decay that felt weirdly poetic at 2 a.m. Where are we going? Mariska gasped, her lungs burning. Human lungs. Stupid, inefficient human lungs that required oxygen and rest and other inconvenient things. Somewhere safe, Valerius replied without slowing down. Somewhere the council won't think to look. That's not an answer, that's a fortune cookie. Would you prefer I told you we're heading into the supernatural underground, a network of tunnels beneath the city where vampires, werewolves and various other creatures conduct their black market business, and that we'll be seeking asylum from a contact who may or may not want to kill me on sight? Mariska considered this. Actually, yeah, the fortune cookie thing was better. They turned down an alley that Mariska was 90% sure didn't exist yesterday. The walls seemed to shimmer, reality doing that thing where it pretended to be solid but was actually more of a suggestion. At the end of the alley stood a door. Plain, wooden, completely unremarkable except for the fact that it was carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Valerius knocked 3 times, paused, knocked twice more than once. A code, presumably. Unless he was just really indecisive about knocking. The door opened to reveal a woman who looked like she'd been specifically designed to make mortals question their life choices. Tall, with skin the color of burnished copper and hair that moved like it was underwater despite the complete lack of breeze. Her eyes were solid gold. No pupils, no whites, just gold, and when she smiled her teeth were slightly too sharp to be comfortable. Valerius Frostborn, she purred, her voice like honey mixed with threat. I heard you were dead. I've heard the same about you, Nadia. Multiple times. Yet here we both are, defying expectations. How delightfully stubborn of us. Her golden eyes shifted to Mariska, then to the baby. And you've brought guest. How? Unexpected. Is that a frost prince? Yes. Is he yours? Yes. Are you aware the Blood Council has put a bounty on his head large enough to buy a small country? I'm aware. Nadia's smile widened. Well then, this should be interesting. Come in before someone sees you loitering at my doorstep like vampiric solicitors. The door led to stairs. The stairs led down. Way down. Mariska counted 50 steps before she stopped counting and just focused on not falling, not dropping Alexander, and not thinking too hard about the fact that she was descending into the literal supernatural underground with a vampire king and a maybe demon woman whose eyes were made of precious metal. The underground was nothing like she'd expected. She'd pictured dark tunnels, dripping water, maybe some torches for ambience. Instead it looked like someone had taken a night market and a speakeasy, thrown them in a blender with some magic, and poured the result into a massive cavern that defied normal geometry. Stalls lined the walls, selling everything from bottles of glowing liquid to weapons that hummed with power to what appeared to be actual pieces of starlight trapped in jars. Creatures of every description moved through the space. Some humanoid, some decidedly not, all of them radiating the kind of otherness that made Mariska's hindbrain scream warnings about predators and prey. Welcome to the Twilight Market, Nadia said, gesturing expansively. Where anything can be bought, sold, or traded assuming you have the right currency. We deal in favors here, Valerius. What exactly are you offering for sanctuary? Information, Valerius replied. About the council's next move. About their plans for the Frost Prince bloodline. About the real reason they want Alexander dead. Nadia's eyebrows rose. You named him? That's unusually sentimental for you. His mother named him. Before she. Valerius's voice tightened. Before. Ah. Nadia's expression softened slightly, which on her face looked more unsettling than comforting. The Winter Fae. I heard about that. Tragic. Beautiful. Very you. Can you help us or not? I can offer you a room for the night. Maybe 2 nights if you're lucky and the council is slow. After that. He shrugged. After that you're on your own. I run a business, not a charity for wayward vampire royalty. That's all I ask. Nadia led them through the market, past stalls where Mariska saw things she couldn't quite process. A merchant selling memories in crystal vials, a blacksmith forging swords from what looked like solidified moonlight, a fortune teller whose cards seemed to shuffle themselves. Everything was too bright, too vivid, too real in a way that suggested reality was negotiable down here. They stopped at a door carved from what appeared to be a single massive gemstone. Obsidian maybe, or something that looked like obsidian if obsidian could have stars trapped inside it. "This is yours for tonight," Nadia said, producing a key from nowhere. "The room is warded against scrying, tracking, and unwanted visitors. The bed is comfortable assuming you still sleep. The bathroom has running water that may or may not be from this dimension. I've stopped asking questions. And the mini fridge is stocked with beverages appropriate for various dietary requirements." "Blood?" Valerius asked. "Type O negative, ethically sourced. We're civilized down here. And for the human? Regular food. Also ethically sourced, though I make no promises about the expiration dates." Mariska spoke up for the first time since entering the underground. "Why are you helping us?" Nadia turned those unsettling golden eyes on her. "Because I despise the Blood Council and their arbitrary rules about what is and isn't acceptable bloodline mixing. Because I find Valerius's sudden paternal instincts fascinating. And because frankly I'm bored. This is the most interesting thing to happen in months. So we're entertainment. Everything is entertainment if you have the right perspective, little human. Now get inside before someone notices I'm being nice. I have a reputation to maintain." The room was larger than it should have been given the door size. More of that flexible geometry. A massive bed dominated one side, covered in blankets that looked like they were woven from shadows. A sitting area with chairs that seemed to be made from crystallized smoke. And in the corner, a bassinet that definitely hadn't been there a second ago, perfectly sized for a baby and lined with what looked like enchanted frost that wouldn't melt. "She thinks of everything," Valerius murmured, looking at the bassinet with something that might have been gratitude. Mariska carried Alexander over and carefully laid him down. The baby made a soft sound, not distress, just acknowledgement, and the frost from his skin spread across the bassinet's lining, creating patterns that looked almost like language. Like he was trying to communicate. "Does he know what's happening?" Mariska asked. "Does he understand that people want him dead?" "He's a baby. He understands warmth and cold, comfort and discomfort, safety and fear. The specifics." Valerius shook his head. "Those come later. If he lives long enough to learn them. He will. Your optimism is admirable. And naive. Yeah, well, someone has to be optimistic in this disaster." Mariska collapsed into one of the smoke chairs, which was surprisingly comfortable. "So, the Blood Council. Your son. The fact that we're hiding in an underground market that probably violates several laws of physics. Want to explain what we've gotten ourselves into?" Valerius was quiet for a long moment, standing by the bassinet, looking down at his son with an expression Mariska couldn't quite read. Then he spoke and his voice carried the weight of centuries. "The Frost Prince bloodline was once the most powerful among vampires. We could walk in winter sunlight without burning. We could freeze our enemies with a thought. We were gods in our own way. But power like that always comes with a cost." "Let me guess," Mariska said. "The cost was that you couldn't touch anyone without hurting them." "Precisely. Every Frost Prince is born with magic too powerful to control. Too cold to contain. They freeze everything. People, places, emotions. Love becomes fatal. Connection becomes impossible. Most die in infancy, their parents unable to care for them without risking death. Those who survive become isolated. Alone. Mad with loneliness." He paused, his hand hovering over Alexander but not quite touching. "The Blood Council decided 300 years ago that Frost Princes were too dangerous to allow. They passed a law. Any Frost Prince born must be destroyed immediately. No exceptions. No appeals. Just death. That's genocide. That's politics." Valerius's voice was bitter. Dressed up in pretty language about the greater good and necessary sacrifices. But when Alexander was born, when I held him for those few seconds before his mother fell into stasis. He stopped. I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill him. So I left him somewhere I thought he'd die quickly. Painlessly. Without me having to watch. You're a coward, Mariska said flatly. Yes. And an idiot. Also yes. But you came back. You saved him from the assassins. You're here now. Valerius finally looked at her and his eyes were haunted. I came back because I couldn't stay away. Because every moment since I left him I've felt him. The cold. The magic. The bond between father and son that apparently even I, in all my cowardice, couldn't completely sever. I came back because dying with him seemed preferable to living without him. The honesty in his voice was startling. Brutal. The kind of truth that cut on the way out. Mariska stood up and walked over to him. She was shorter by almost a foot, human where he was vampire, warm where he was cold. But she met his eyes without fear. Then stay, she said simply. Stay and figure out how to be his father. Stay and find a way to keep him alive. Stay and prove that the Blood Council is wrong, that frost princes can exist without destroying everything around them. Stay, Valerius. Stop running. I don't know how. Then learn. You've had 3 centuries to master everything else. Master this. They stood there in the impossible room, surrounded by shadows and frost and the sleeping sound of a baby who shouldn't exist, and something shifted. Mariska felt it. A change in the air, in the magic that permeated this place, in the space between them. Valerius reached out slowly, carefully, and touched her hand. His skin was cold, freezing but bearable. Like holding ice that had learned to be gentle. Thank you, he said quietly. For saving him. For staying. For being foolish enough to believe this might work. Someone has to believe it. Might as well be me. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Both of them tensed. Valerius moving in front of the bassinet instinctively, Mariska grabbing the closest weapon-like object, which turned out to be a decorative candle holder made from crystal. It's me, Nadia's voice called through the door. We have a problem. Valerius opened the door. What kind of problem? The kind where the Blood Council has discovered your location faster than expected and is currently negotiating with my business partners about violating sanctuary laws. Nadia's smile was sharp as broken glass. You have maybe 20 minutes before this place is swarming with assassins. I suggest you use them wisely. Mariska looked at Valerius. Valerius looked at Alexander. And in that moment Mariska realized something important. They weren't just running from danger anymore. They were running towards something. Something that might be hope or might be death or might be both. We need a plan, she said. Valerius smiled, and it was not a nice smile. I have one. You're not going to like it. Try me. We stop running. We fight back. We go to the one person who might be able to help us. Someone who knows more about frost princes than anyone alive. Who? Alexander's mother. Seraphina. Who, according to every report I've received, is very definitely still dead. Mariska blinked. You want to ask a dead woman for help? I want to find out if she's actually dead. Because the more I think about it, the more I realize that a Winter Fae dying from cold makes about as much sense as a fish drowning in water. The journey to find a potentially not dead Winter Fae while carrying a frost-cursed baby and evading vampire assassins was, Mariska reflected, not how she'd expected her week to go. Then again, she'd once had a customer ask for a deconstructed latte at 3 in the morning, so really, nothing should surprise her anymore. They'd left the Twilight Market through what Nadia called a back exit, which turned out to be a portal that opened directly into a forest that definitely wasn't in Oregon. The trees were too white, the sky too dark, and the snow that fell upward instead of down was a pretty solid clue that they'd left normal geography behind. Where are we? Mariska asked, adjusting her grip on Alexander. The baby had been surprisingly quiet during their escape, as if he understood that silence meant survival. Smart kid. Terrifying but smart. The Winter Court, Valerius replied, his voice tight with tension. Seraphina's homeland. Where the Fae who embody winter itself make their home. Also where I am extremely not welcome, given that I supposedly killed their princess. Supposedly. Well, I didn't actually kill her. The cold did. Technically. I don't think technicalities matter much when it comes to dead royalty. You'd be surprised. The Fae are very particular about technicalities. It's basically their entire legal system. They walked through the forest, and Mariska tried not to think about how the trees seemed to be watching them. Not metaphorically, literally watching, their bark shifting to form patterns that looked disturbingly like eyes. The snow crunched under her feet in ways that sounded almost like words, like the ground itself was trying to communicate. Alexander made a small sound and frost spread from his body in a wave, creating patterns in the air that glittered like diamonds before fading. It was beautiful. Deadly but beautiful. He's reacting to the magic here, Valerius observed. The Winter Court resonates with his bloodline. He's more powerful here. Is that good or bad? Both. He's stronger, which means harder to kill. But also harder to control. If his magic spikes. Valerius didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. Time worked differently in the Fae realms, Mariska was learning. Finally, they emerged into a clearing where a palace stood, carved entirely from ice that never melted. It rose toward the dark sky like a frozen dream, all spires and archways and impossible architecture that hurt to look at directly. Guards stood at the entrance. They wore armor made from winter itself, their faces obscured by helms that looked like frozen waterfalls. When they saw Valerius, their weapons, spears that seemed to be made from concentrated cold, lowered immediately. Valerius Frostborn, one guard said, their voice echoing strangely. You dare return to the place where you murdered our princess? I dare a lot of things, Valerius replied calmly. Which is why I'm here to prove she's not dead. The guards exchanged glances. Explain. Winter Fae don't die from cold. It's literally impossible. Seraphina went into stasis to protect our son from assassins, and I, being an idiot with poor reading comprehension, assumed she was dead. I'd like to see her body. The body is in the crystal vault. None may enter without permission from the Winter Court. Yes, I know. Get me an audience with whoever's in charge now. Tell them I've brought something interesting. What? Valerius gestured to Alexander. The Frost Prince. The abomination. The child they've probably heard rumors about. Also my son. Tell them that too. It'll make things more dramatic. The guards disappeared in a swirl of snow. Mariska turned to Valerius with wide eyes. Did you just announce to hostile Fae guards that you're carrying the baby they probably want dead? Yes. That's your plan? Honesty. The Fae can't lie. They find deliberate truth-telling either refreshing or insulting, and I'm banking on refreshing. Also, they're curious by nature. They'll want to see Alexander. And if they decide to kill him on sight, then I'll kill them first. It'll be very tragic and dramatic and we'll probably start a war. But at least we'll go down fighting. You have terrible plans. I have historically bad judgment, yes. But I'm working on it. Before Mariska could respond, the guards returned along with a figure who made her breath catch. They were tall, absurdly tall, maybe 8 feet, with skin that looked like it was made from snow pressed into human shape. Their hair flowed like aurora borealis, colors shifting and dancing, and their eyes were winter storms given form. I am Crystalise, the figure said, their voice like avalanches. Regent of the Winter Court in Princess Seraphina's absence. You claim she lives. I claim she's in stasis, which is significantly different from dead, Valerius replied. And I can prove it if you let me see her. Crystalise studied him for a long moment, then looked at Mariska, then at the baby in her arms. Their expression shifted. Surprise, curiosity, something that might have been hope. The child has her eyes, Crystalise said softly. Unfocused, yes, but the shape, that's Seraphina's line. You truly believe she lives? I believe I made a terrible mistake based on incomplete information and my own cowardice. I believe I abandoned my son and fled like a coward. I believe I'm here now trying to fix it. So yes, I believe she lives. And I need to wake her up. Because you love her? Because she's the only one who might know how to help Alexander survive. Crystalise smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Honesty. How novel. Very well. Come. See your supposedly dead princess. And pray to whatever gods you acknowledge that you're correct. They were led through the ice palace, down corridors that seemed to shift and change when Mariska wasn't looking directly at them. Other Fae watched from doorways and alcoves, beautiful, terrifying creatures who radiated cold and power and ancient magic. They whispered as the group passed, their voices like whined through frozen branches. The vampire returns. He brings the cursed child. Fool or brave? Perhaps both. If the princess is truly gone, his death will be slow. Mariska held Alexander closer, and the baby made that sound again. The wind-through-pipe sound that seemed to resonate with the palace itself. The ice walls vibrated in response, creating harmonics that were almost musical. "He's singing to the palace," Crystalise observed. "Interesting. Frost princes typically cannot communicate their magic so young." "Alexander is full of surprises," Valerius said, and there was something in his voice that might have been pride. The crystal vault was at the heart of the palace, a circular room where the walls, floor, and ceiling were all made from flawless ice that showed reflections infinity deep. In the center, on a platform of frozen light, lay a woman. She was breathtaking. Even in stasis, even perfectly still, Seraphina radiated a kind of beauty that made everything else seem dull by comparison. Her skin was alabaster white, her hair spread around her head like a halo of silver and blue. She wore a dress that seemed to be woven from snowflakes, and her hands were folded across her chest in perfect peace. She looked dead. Valerius approached slowly, each step seeming to cost him. When he reached the platform, he stood there for a long moment, just staring down at her. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I failed you. I failed him. I failed everyone. But if there's any chance, any possibility that you can hear me, I need you to wake up. Alexander needs you. I need you. Please." "Nothing happened. This is pointless," Crystalise said. "She's gone, Valerius. Accept it." "No." Valerius turned to Mariska. "Give me Alexander." "What? Why?" "Because if she's in stasis protecting him from his own magic, then his presence might be what wakes her. It's worth trying." Mariska looked down at the baby in her arms. At his unfocused eyes and frost-covered skin and tiny, perfect face. Then she looked at Seraphina, lying still as death on her platform. "If this kills her for real, then I'll deserve whatever punishment the Winter Court inflicts. But I don't think it will. I think..." Valerius's voice cracked. "I think she's been waiting. Waiting for me to stop being a coward. Waiting for someone to bring her son home." Mariska walked forward and carefully, so carefully, laid Alexander on Seraphina's chest. The baby's frost-covered skin touched his mother's frozen dress. And the world exploded with light. Not metaphorically. Literally. Light erupted from the point of contact, spreading outward in waves that felt like warmth and cold simultaneously, like summer and winter having a conversation in the language of pure magic. The ice walls of the vault cracked, reformed, cracked again. The platform beneath Seraphina began to glow, pulsing with power that made Mariska's teeth ache and her eyes water. Alexander made a sound, not the wind-through-pipe sound but something else. Something joyful. The frost around him shifted, changed, became less threatening and more celebratory. Like fireworks made of ice. And Seraphina's eyes opened. They were the same unfocused blue as Alexander's, but they saw everything. They fixed on Valerius with an expression that cycled through confusion, understanding, fury, and something that might have been love or might have been the desire to commit murder. "Hard to tell with Fae. You," she said, her voice rusty from disuse. "Complete idiot." Valerius actually laughed, a sound of pure relief that echoed through the vault like bells. "Hello, Seraphina. You're not dead. Clearly. I thought you were dead. I noticed. You abandoned our son in a dumpster, you dramatic fool. In my defense, I was operating under incomplete information. Did you even read the whole prophecy?" Valerius went very quiet. "How did you know about the prophecy?" "Because I wrote part of it, you absolute disaster of a vampire. It was a contingency plan in case your uncle's assassins came after Alexander. The death by cold bit was code for going into stasis. But apparently someone didn't read carefully enough. The grammar was very confusing. It was in modern Fae, which I barely speak." Mariska watched this exchange with something between horror and delight. Here was the supposedly tragic death, the separation that had driven Valerius to abandon his child, and it was happening because of a linguistic misunderstanding and poor communication. It was the most mundane, ridiculous, perfectly normal reason for a supernatural disaster she'd ever encountered. "Oh my God," she said, interrupting their argument. "You two are disasters. Both of you. Absolute disasters." Seraphina's unfocused eyes shifted to her. "And who is this?" "I'm Mariska." I found your son in a dumpster, yelled at your husband. Not married, both Valerius and Seraphina said simultaneously. Yelled at your not husband, watched him kill assassins, fled through an underground market and traveled to the winter court while carrying your baby. So, normal Tuesday. Seraphina sat up, cradling Alexander against her chest. The baby made happy sounds, actual happy baby sounds, not creepy windpipe sounds, and the frost around both of them seemed to dance. You held him, Seraphina said, wonder in her voice. You held my frost prince son and didn't freeze. I mean, it hurt. A lot. But I managed. No one manages. The cold is too intense. It should have killed you. Mariska shrugged. I worked night shift at a Portland cafe for 7 years. I've built up immunity to a lot of things that should kill people. Apparently, magical frost is one of them. Seraphina looked at Valerius. Valerius looked at Mariska. Mariska looked at Alexander, who seemed to be enjoying the attention. I want a divorce, Seraphina announced. We're not married, Valerius repeated. Then I want a hypothetical divorce from our hypothetical marriage. That's fair. The reunion, Mariska decided, was going about as well as could be expected for a situation involving magical resurrection, supernatural babies and commitment-phobic immortals. Which was to say, it was a beautiful disaster. Seraphina had moved from the crystal vault to what Crystal Lise called the recovery chambers. A room that looked like someone had taken a luxury spa and frozen it in time, complete with heated pools that somehow didn't melt the ice floors. But there's always magic. Let me get this straight, Seraphina said, pacing while holding Alexander. The baby seemed entranced by his mother, his unfocused eyes tracking her movements in a way they hadn't tracked anything else. You thought I was dead, so instead of actually checking with magic or logic or basic critical thinking, you decided the best course of action was to leave our infant son in a dumpster? When you put it like that, it sounds bad, Valerius admitted. He was sitting in a chair made of ice that looked deeply uncomfortable, his posture radiating the kind of tension that suggested he knew he deserved whatever was coming. Because it is bad. Objectively, catastrophically bad. I panicked. You're 300 years old. You don't get to panic. Apparently I do. Fatherhood was not covered in my very extensive education on being an immortal creature of the night. Mariska, sitting in her own ice chair and wrapped in a blanket made of something that felt like concentrated warmth, watched the argument with the fascination of someone witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. Seraphina was magnificent when angry. Her hair literally sparked with frost, her eyes glowed with inner light, and the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees with each accusation. You know what the worst part is? Seraphina continued, her voice rising. The absolute worst part? I left you a note. In the prophecy. Explicitly stating that I wasn't actually dying, just entering protective stasis. Did you read the note, Valerius? Silence. Did you read the note? I may have skimmed. You skimmed. It was a very stressful situation. You looked dead. There was ice everywhere. Our son was crying and freezing everything he touched. I wasn't exactly in the optimal headspace for comprehensive reading. The note, Seraphina said with dangerous calm, was 3 sentences long. 3 sentences. Valerius looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Which, given that they were in a magical Fae palace, was probably actually possible if he asked nicely. Mariska decided to intervene before Seraphina committed justifiable homicide. So, in the interest of moving forward, because dwelling on past mistakes seems counterproductive, and also there are still assassins who want Alexander dead, maybe we could focus on solutions? Seraphina turned those glowing eyes on her. You're right. You're absolutely right. But I'm saving this argument for later, Valerius. We're not done. I assumed as much. Good. Seraphina looked down at Alexander, her expression softening completely. My beautiful boy. My perfect, impossible boy. You've grown so much. It's been 6 months, Valerius said quietly. 6 months I can't get back. 6 months I spent trying not to think about him, trying to convince myself I'd done the right thing, trying to run from your feelings? Seraphina interrupted, but her voice was gentler now. That's very on brand for you. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I don't know how to be a father to a child who could kill with a touch. I don't know how to protect him from the Blood Council who want him eliminated. I don't know how to. You learn, Serafina said firmly, echoing Mariska's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. That's what parents do. They learn. They adapt. They make terrible mistakes and then try to fix them. Speaking of which, she turned to Mariska. Thank you. For saving him. For keeping him alive when this disaster of a vampire couldn't. I just did what anyone would do. No. You did what almost no one would do. You held a frost prince, something that should have killed you and survived. You faced down assassins. You followed Valerius into the supernatural underground without knowing if you'd survive. That's not normal. That's extraordinary. Mariska felt her cheeks heat. I mean, when you put it like that. I'm putting it exactly like that. You saved my son's life. That makes you family as far as I'm concerned. And family. Serafina smiled, and it was equal parts warm and terrifying. Gets protected. Crystalise chose that moment to enter, their massive form somehow fitting through a doorway that was definitely too small for them. More magic probably. The Blood Council has sent envoys, Crystalise announced. They're demanding an audience. They claim they have evidence that the Frost Prince poses an existential threat to all supernatural bloodlines and must be destroyed immediately. Of course they do, Valerius muttered. Let me guess. They want to present this evidence in a formal trial where the outcome is predetermined and Alexander is found guilty before we even start? Precisely. However, Crystalis's storm eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. The Winter Court has the right to demand trial by combat instead of trial by testimony. It's an old law but still valid. Trial by combat? Mariska repeated. Like actual fighting? Indeed. The accused, or their champion, faces the council's chosen warrior. Winner takes all. If the champion wins, the accused is declared innocent and all charges are dropped. Serafina and Valerius exchanged glances. I'll fight, Valerius said immediately. You'll lose, Serafina countered. The council will send someone specifically designed to counter your frost magic. Someone who can absorb cold instead of being harmed by it. Then what do you suggest? I fight. I'm a Winter Fae princess. Cold is literally my element. And I'm angry. Very, very angry. At you, at the council, at everyone who thinks my son is disposable. You just woke up from 6 months of stasis. You're not at full strength. I'm strong enough. They were both wrong, Mariska realized. The council would plan for either of them fighting. They'd have contingencies, backup plans, ways to ensure their champion won regardless of who stepped into the arena. This wasn't about justice. It was about eliminating a threat to their power structure, and they'd do whatever it took. What if, Mariska said slowly, they're not expecting a human champion? Everyone turned to stare at her. Absolutely not, Valerius said. That's suicide, Serafina added. Probably, Mariska agreed. But think about it. The council is preparing for supernatural combat. For magic and ancient power and centuries of experience. They're not preparing for someone with 0 magical abilities and a really good poker face. You'll die in seconds. Maybe. Or maybe I'll survive long enough to figure out their weakness. I'm good at reading people. Comes with 7 years of customer service. And I'm stubborn. Really, really stubborn. This is insane, Valerius said flatly. This whole situation is insane. At least my brand of insane might catch them off guard. Crystalise made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been the wind through frozen trees. The human has spirit. I appreciate spirit. However, if she fights and loses, the Frost Prince dies. Are you willing to risk that? Mariska looked at Alexander, who was watching her with those unfocused eyes that somehow saw everything. She thought about finding him in the dumpster, about the frost that had burned her arms, about the way he'd smiled when Serafina woke up. She thought about all the children in all the dumpsters, metaphorical or literal, who never got saved because someone decided they were too much trouble. Yes, she said. I'm willing to risk it. Because if we don't fight, if we run and hide and let the council dictate who gets to live and who gets to die, then what's the point? Alexander deserves better than a life in hiding. He deserves a chance. Serafina studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. All right. But if you're going to be stupid and brave, you're going to do it properly. Crystalise, we need to prepare her. Prepare me how? Mariska asked suspiciously. The trial is in 3 hours. We have that long to teach you everything you need to know about supernatural combat, Fae law, and how to survive against something that could kill you with a thought. That's not nearly enough time. No. But it's what we have. So we'd better make it count. The next 3 hours were the most intense of Mariska's life. Crystalise taught her about Fae combat protocols, the rules that governed who could strike when, the forbidden moves, the ways to exploit loopholes in ancient laws. Serafina worked on her mental defenses, teaching her how to resist magical influence and mind control. And Valerius, surprisingly, taught her how to read supernatural body language. Everything telegraphs, he explained, demonstrating with slow movements. Vampires have to shift their weight before striking. Werewolves' pupils dilate before they transform. Fae magic creates temperature changes before manifestation. Watch for the tells and you can predict the attack. That assumes I'm fast enough to dodge. You won't be. But knowing where the attack is coming from might give you half a second advantage. Use it wisely. They also equipped her. Not with weapons. Humans couldn't effectively wield magical weapons apparently, but with armor. Light, flexible, made from something Crystalise called condensed moonlight, that would absorb exactly one fatal blow before shattering. One hit, Mariska repeated. That's not much of a safety net. It's more than most mortals get, Crystalise replied. Use it wisely. Finally, as the 3 hours ticked down to minutes, Serafina pulled Mariska aside. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. We can find another way. We can run, hide, fight guerrilla style until what? Until Alexander grows up never knowing safety? Never having a home? Always looking over his shoulder. Mariska shook her head. I didn't save him from a dumpster just to condemn him to a different kind of prison. This ends now one way or another. You're either very brave or very stupid. I've been told it's both. Serafina reached out and gently touched Mariska's face. Her hand was cold but not painful, frost forming delicate patterns on Mariska's skin that felt almost like a blessing. If you die, Serafina said, I'll make sure you're remembered. Heroes deserve that much. Let's focus on the not dying part. Agreed. They walked together to the arena, a massive circular space carved from ice, surrounded by tiers where Fae spectators gathered to watch. The Blood Council sat in a special section, 5 vampires who looked like they'd been carved from expensive stone and animated by malice. Their champion stood in the center of the arena. He was massive. 8 feet tall, muscles like granite, skin that seemed to shift between solid and shadow. His eyes were pure red, burning with inner fire that suggested he was something more, or less, than vampire. That's a revenant, Valerius said quietly. A vampire who's died and been brought back through blood magic. They feel no pain. They have no fear. And they're specifically designed to counter frost magic by generating internal heat that prevents freezing. So I'm fighting an unkillable fire vampire. Great. Fantastic. Exactly what I wanted. It's not too late to. Yes, it is. Mariska walked into the arena. The revenant watched her approach with something that might have been confusion or might have been amusement. Hard to tell with the whole burning eyes thing. The human fights, it said, its voice like rocks grinding together. The council sends me to kill a frost prince, and they send a mortal with a coffee-stained jacket? This is insulting. Yeah, well, I'm having a weird week, Mariska replied. Let's get this over with. Crystalise stepped forward, their massive form commanding attention. The rules are simple. Fight until one yields, one dies, or one is rendered unable to continue. Magic is permitted. Weapons are permitted. Outside interference results in automatic forfeiture. Begin, now. The revenant moved. And Mariska's real education in supernatural combat began. The revenant moved like a freight train given sentience and murderous intent. Fast. Impossibly fast, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Mariska threw herself sideways, remembering Valerius's training about reading body language, and felt the displacement of air as the revenant's fist passed where her head had been. The ice floor where she'd been standing cracked, spider-webbing outward from the impact point. One hit. That's all it would take. You're quick, the revenant rumbled, turning with mechanical precision. For a human. It won't save you. Mariska didn't waste breath on a response. He was already moving, circling, watching. The revenant's shoulders tensed before each strike. There, that was the tell. His weight shifted to his left foot when preparing to lunge. Another tell. He was powerful, but power meant momentum and momentum meant commitment. She could work with that. The Revenant lunged again and Mariska dropped flat, sliding across the ice like a hockey puck. His fist slammed into empty air and she used the momentum to roll away, coming up in a crouch. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it, feel it, taste it in the back of her throat. "Stand still," the Revenant growled. "Yeah, that's not really my strategy." From the stands she could hear murmuring. The Fae spectators were intrigued now. This wasn't the instant slaughter they'd expected. The Blood Council members were leaning forward, expressions shifting from smug certainty to something that might have been concern. Good. Let them worry. The Revenant changed tactics. Instead of lunging, he began generating heat, actual visible heat that made the air shimmer and the ice beneath his feet start to melt. Steam rose from his body and his eyes burned brighter, turning the arena into a sauna. "I don't need to catch you," he said, spreading his arms wide. "I just need to make the environment hostile enough that you collapse. How long can a human survive in extreme heat, I wonder? 10 minutes? 5. Mariska felt sweat already forming on her skin. The moonlight armor was helping, but not enough. The temperature was climbing fast and her human body, stupid, inefficient mortal, was already starting to protest. Her vision wavered slightly. Her breathing became labored. She had minutes, maybe less. She'd survived 7 years of night shift by being smarter than the problems in front of her. This was just another problem. A really big, really hot, really murderous problem, but still, there had to be a solution. The ice. The Revenant was melting the ice to create steam, to make the arena uninhabitable for her. But ice was water and water conducted heat. And if she remembered her terrible high school physics correctly, Mariska ran. Not away from the Revenant, but toward the edge of the arena where the ice walls were thickest. The Revenant followed, his footsteps melting the floor, creating puddles that were already starting to steam. "Running just delays the inevitable," he called after her. "Yeah, I get that a lot." She reached the wall and pressed her hands against it, feeling the cold burn her palms. Not as bad as Alexander's frost, but close. The ice was solid, ancient, infused with Fae magic that made it nearly indestructible. Nearly. "Valerius," she shouted toward the stands. "I need you to trust me." "That's a concerning thing to hear mid-combat," he shouted back. "Freeze the floor. All of it. As cold as you can make it. That will affect you too." "I know. Do it anyway." For a moment nothing happened. Then the temperature plummeted. Not gradually, instantly. Valerius's frost magic erupted across the arena floor like a tidal wave, turning every puddle the Revenant had created into solid ice in seconds. The steam condensed, froze. The air itself seemed to crystallize. The Revenant roared, pumping more heat into his body to compensate. His internal fire burned brighter, turning his skin translucent with the intensity of the heat he was generating. And that's when Mariska saw it. The weakness. Fire needed fuel. The Revenant was burning through his own magical reserves to maintain that temperature, to keep himself from freezing in Valerius's artificial winter. He was powerful, but power wasn't infinite. Eventually he'd burn out. She just had to survive until then. The cold was brutal. Mariska's breath came out in clouds. Her fingers were going numb despite the moonlight armor. Her body was screaming at her to find warmth, to escape, to stop this madness before hypothermia set in. She ignored it. 7 years of Portland winters had taught her something important. Cold was survivable if you kept moving. So she moved. The Revenant charged, his footsteps melting through Valerius's ice, creating patches of slush and steam. But the ice reformed almost immediately, spreading faster than he could melt it. He was fighting a war on 2 fronts now, trying to kill Mariska and trying not to freeze. Mariska dodged, slipped, rolled, scrambled. Her movements were getting sloppier. The cold was affecting her coordination, but the Revenant was slowing too. His strikes were less precise. His movements were becoming jerky, mechanical, as if his joints were stiffening. "Yield," he growled, his voice staticky. "This is pointless. We'll both die if this continues." "Yeah, but I'm okay with that," Mariska gasped. "Are you?" The Revenant's red eyes flickered, actually flickered like a light bulb with faulty wiring. His internal fire was wavering, struggling to maintain intensity against the overwhelming cold. He made a decision. Instead of trying to fight both Mariska and the cold, he turned all his attention to the latter. His body erupted with heat, a final desperate surge that melted the ice in a 20-foot radius and created a wall of steam that obscured everything. Mariska couldn't see, couldn't hear properly through the roar of boiling water, couldn't tell where the revenant was or what he was doing. She did the only thing she could think of. She stayed still and listened. Not with her ears, those were useless in the chaos, but with her other senses. The displacement of air, the changes in temperature, the minute vibrations in the ice beneath her feet. There, to her left, moving fast. She threw herself right, and the revenant's fist passed through the space where she'd been. But this time she'd moved too slowly. The edge of his strike caught her shoulder, spinning her around, sending her sprawling across the ice. Pain exploded through her body. Not just from the impact but from the heat. His touch had burned through the moonlight armor like it was paper. She felt the protective magic shatter, its single use consumed. No more safety net. The revenant loomed over her, his red eyes burning through the steam. It's over, human. You fought well. Better than expected. But it ends now. He raised his fist for the killing blow. Mariska looked up at him and smiled. You're right. It does end now. Just not the way you think. She pressed her palms flat against the ice and screamed, Alexander. From the stands, the baby, who'd been remarkably quiet throughout the entire fight, held by Serafina, responded. He cried. Not a normal cry. The wind-through-frozen pipes cry that he'd made in the dumpster in the cafe, in every moment of distress and fear. The cry that spoke of magic too big for a tiny body, of frost that wanted to spread, of cold that wanted to consume. The temperature didn't just drop. It cratered. Ice erupted from every surface simultaneously. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, the air itself. Not Valerius's controlled, precise frost, but Alexander's wild, chaotic, overwhelming cold. The kind of cold that didn't just freeze things but fundamentally changed them at a molecular level. The revenant's fire went out like a candle in a hurricane. Ice spread across his body faster than thought, encasing him in crystalline prison. He had time for one expression, surprise maybe, or rage or fear, before he became a statue frozen mid-strike, his fist suspended inches from Mariska's face. The arena went silent except for Alexander's crying, which was already fading back to normal baby sounds as Serafina soothed him. Mariska lay on the ice, every part of her body screaming in pain, and started laughing. Came out breathless, manic, edged with shock and relief, and the kind of hysteria that comes from surviving something that absolutely should have killed you. Did I win? She called up to Crystalise. Because I feel like I won, but also I can't feel my legs, so my judgment might be compromised. Crystalise stood, their massive form radiating approval. The revenant is unable to continue. By the laws of trial by combat, the charges against the Frost Prince are dismissed. He is declared innocent of all accusations. The Blood Council erupted in protest, but Crystalis's voice cut through their objections like a blade through silk. The law is clear. The trial has concluded. Your champion lost. Accept defeat with grace or leave our court in disgrace. Choose wisely. The 5 council members looked at each other, their expressions cycling through fury, calculation, and finally reluctant acceptance. The lead counselor, an ancient vampire who looked like someone had carved aristocracy into physical form, stood. The Winter Court has spoken, they said, each word sounding like it cost them. The Frost Prince is innocent. For now. But know this, Valerius Frostborn, we will be watching. If the child proves dangerous, if his magic harms even one being, the trial begins anew. Noted, Valerius called back, appearing beside Mariska on the ice. He knelt down, his cold hand gentle on her burned shoulder. Can you stand? Probably not. But I can certainly try and fail dramatically. He actually smiled. A real smile, warm despite the cold that radiated from his skin. You're the most stubborn human I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. Serafina appeared on her other side, still holding Alexander. The baby had stopped crying completely and was making happy sounds again, oblivious to the fact that he'd just helped win a trial by combat through the sheer power of his magical tantrum. You called my son, Serafina said softly. You weaponized a 6-month-old's distress response. Is that bad? That feels like it might be bad. That's brilliant. Terrible parenting, probably, but brilliant strategy. I'll add it to my resume. Successfully used baby as tactical weapon. References available upon request. Valerius carefully picked her up, and Mariska was too exhausted to protest. Her body felt like one giant bruise, her shoulder was definitely going to scar, and she was pretty sure she had mild hypothermia. But they were alive. All of them. Against all odds, against ancient laws and vampire assassins and a revenant specifically designed to kill, they'd survived. What happens now? She asked as Valerius carried her out of the arena, Serafina walking beside them with Alexander. Now, Valerius said, we figure out how to be a family. However unconventional that might look. A vampire king, a Winter Fae princess, a frost-cursed baby, and a human waitress walk into a bar, Mariska murmured. Sounds like the start of a terrible joke. Or the start of something new, Serafina suggested. Something the supernatural world hasn't seen before. A family that crosses all traditional boundaries. A family built not on bloodline purity or ancient law but on choice. On the decision to stay, to fight, to love despite the cost. Alexander made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been gas. Hard to tell with babies. They walked through the ice palace together, past Fae who watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to approval to barely concealed awe. Word would spread, Mariska knew. The story of the human who faced a revenant and survived. The Frost Prince who was declared innocent. The family that defied the Blood Council and won. It wouldn't be easy. The council would watch them, waiting for any excuse to try again. Other enemies would emerge. They always did when you disrupted power structures. And raising a child who could freeze things with a touch was going to present some unique parenting challenges. But for the first time since finding a baby in a dumpster behind her destroyed cafe, Mariska felt something unexpected. Hope. So, she said as they reached the recovery chambers. I don't suppose the Winter Court needs a barista? Because I'm currently unemployed, homeless, and apparently part of a supernatural family now. Seems like I should update my career plans accordingly. Crystal Lise, who had followed them, made that sound that might have been laughter. The court could use someone with your particular talents. Stubbornness, creative problem-solving, and a willingness to weaponize infants are surprisingly rare skills. Is that a job offer? Consider it an open invitation. The Winter Court protects those who prove themselves worthy. You, Mariska of the coffee stains and terrible decisions, have proven yourself many times over. Serafina settled into a chair, adjusting Alexander in her arms. The baby was falling asleep now, exhausted from his dramatic intervention. Frost patterns spread from his skin across Serafina's dress, creating artwork that would have been beautiful if it weren't so dangerous. We'll need to teach him control, Serafina said softly, before his magic grows stronger. Before he accidentally hurts someone. Can Frost Princes learn control? Valerius asked, sitting beside her. The histories suggest. The histories were written by people who gave up on them, Serafina interrupted. Who decided they were too dangerous to save. We're not giving up. We're going to figure this out. Together. Mariska watched them. This impossible family born from tragedy and misunderstanding and the stubborn refusal to accept that some problems didn't have solutions. She thought about her old life, her destroyed cafe, her normal existence serving coffee to weird customers at 3 a.m. She didn't miss it. Not even a little. Together, she agreed. Though I'm going to need someone to explain the health insurance situation in the supernatural world. Because I'm pretty sure frozen by baby isn't covered under standard policies. Valerius laughed. Actually laughed, the sound echoing through the recovery chambers like music. I've lived 3 centuries and never considered health insurance for supernatural injuries. This is a new problem. Welcome to modern parenting, Mariska said. It's mostly logistics and exhaustion with occasional moments of terror. Sounds accurate, Serafina murmured, looking down at Alexander's sleeping face with such love that it made Mariska's chest ache. Our beautiful, impossible, dangerous boy. What are we going to do with you? The baby of course didn't answer. He just slept, frost spreading from his skin in patterns that looked almost like words in a language no one could read yet. But maybe, with time and patience and the stubborn refusal to give up that seemed to define this strange family, someone would learn to understand. Maybe that someone would be Alexander himself. Outside the recovery chambers, the winter court continued its eternal existence. Beautiful, cold, perfect. But inside this one room, something warmer was growing. Something that looked like hope and felt like family and existed despite every law and tradition that said it shouldn't. Mariska closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her. When she woke up, whenever that was, there would be new challenges, new dangers, new impossible situations to navigate. But she wouldn't face them alone. None of them would. And somehow that made all the difference.